Welcome to the Aging Well podcast. Today we discuss a fascinating and emerging area of health and longevity, molecular hydrogen therapy. Our guest, known as Greg the Hydrogen Man, is a molecular hydrogen therapy specialist and researcher who has an incredible personal journey of healing and transformation. After struggling with a compromised immune system, tumors, autoimmune issues, severe arthritis, and even being wheelchair-bound due to a serious heart condition, Greg took matters into his own hands. Through extensive research and self-experimentation, he discovered the remarkable health benefits of hydrogen therapy, which helped him reverse his chronic health conditions and reclaim his life. Today, Greg is passionate about educating others on how molecular hydrogen can support longevity, gut health, immune function, and even skin health. He also sheds light on its potential for hormone balance, EMF protection, and chronic disease management. If you've ever wondered how something as simple as hydrogen could have such profound benefits, you won't want to miss this conversation.
If you are recording, I should say, I'm not going to give any medical advice today. I'm not making any medical claims. And everything I'm going to say today is just my opinion and should not be considered as claims for or against any product or products. And so I just like to say that because my journey was really, I got really sick, and I had a lot of major medical issues. And ironically, I did work in the medical field for about 2 decades, maybe a little more. And I really knew exactly what goes on behind the scenes. And to be quite honest with you, it wasn't good. I don't know how a lot of people, they do it. It's just a job, but I saw the limitations of quote unquote Western medicine. So basically when I got sick, I got really concerned because I'm like, Western medicine is not going to help me. And it didn't. I still tried, of course. And it not only didn't do anything, it most likely, it would make things worse. I know that it would make things based on side effects of stuff they want to put you on. And I was already in such bad shape. Technically, I'm not even supposed to be alive right now. So I'm already supposed to be dead. I've been told more than once by certain physicians too, that I'm literally a miracle. It's like, it's a miracle. How did your medical conditions go away? Well, it wasn't by accident. I did a lot of work. I did a lot of research. And throughout my research, this is where things get kind of controversial because I'm not really a fan of, I have friends that are MDs and doctors, and that's great. But I'm not a huge fan about how they go about things, medically. But I'm also not a big fan of a lot of the YouTube health guru, and they claim to be the #1 biohacker in the world. And let me sell you more supplements, and that kind of thing, and get you to eat, I don't know, nothing but meat, go on the carnivore diet or eat nothing but vegetables or something, these very extreme different methods, which, is fine and all. But I really followed a lot of the scientific data, and it really led me down this pretty crazy path. And I developed my own protocols. I don't follow anybody's. I created my own. And I was kind of shocked how good they've worked. Extremely shocked. I've worked with people with easy stuff is like high blood pressure, diabetes, cholesterol issues, a lot of eye issues, glaucoma, macular degeneration, people with cataract issues. I've even worked with a lot of people with brain issues like TBI, which is traumatic brain injury, Alzheimer's, dementia, people with brain fog, people with autoimmune issues, even people with cancer, people with a lot of gut issues. And I've had honestly just ridiculous success that was shocking to me. I never thought in a million years that my protocols would work that good. And it was extremely shocking. One of the most recent ones, there was this poor girl. She had a stroke. She couldn't walk. She couldn't talk. She couldn't dress herself. It's extremely sad. She was going to doctors.
Yes.
By the way, is the microphone okay? Oh, okay. She'd been going to doctors for almost 2 years, and they did zero for her. She still couldn't walk, still couldn't talk. She actually drooled. And she was an absolute mess. And I got the most beautiful email actually from her mother because somebody who knew me said, hey, what kind of protocol would you do? Because I don't get medical advice. I'm like, well, this is what I would do for me. And she ended up following it. She is now walking. She is now talking. Her drool is over 90% gone. And even the doctors that treated her just cannot believe the results. And so they actually want to know what my protocols are. They're like, what in the world is this guy doing? Because they asked them, they're like, what did you do? And that's how doctors and even supposed health gurus find out about me. Because I get a lot of people, I'm not going to name names, but there's a lot of people out in the internet world that claim to be health professionals or, again, biohackers and that they're in amazing health. and they contact me behind the scenes because they're not better. So then they're like, can you please help me? I literally just got off a phone call like a week ago. Again, I won't name a name, but this person's pretty big, and they're known for, that's their whole channel. Everything they do is about being a biohacker and overcoming all these health issues. And this particular person has major health issues, and there's more than one. And I've done many of these type of calls, and I'm the guy who's small time, like that nobody really knows about. So it's been a really wild story because I never thought that I'd be a biohacker, which I don't really consider myself that, but I look at health in a very different way, and it ended up really affecting a lot in regards to longevity and also anti-aging, and really helping improve people's health. And again, absolutely shocking. I mean, I even had another person. I mean, these are the big ones. There was one with dementia. This poor lady didn't even recognize her own daughter. I actually have a video that I made of it. I put everything on. I give everything for free. So everything's on YouTube for free. I don't charge memberships, nothing. The name of the channel is called Uprising 144K. And this one was of a lady who couldn't recognize her own daughter. Her daughter had contacted me. Her mother has dementia. And she was basically saying, look, they haven't been able to do anything for her, anything you can do. And I don't like to, I don't guarantee, I don't like to make guarantees like, oh yeah, this is totally going to work. Because even I've been observing my protocols to see how well they do work or don't work. But this has been going on a lot of years, and I've been racking them up as far as seeing how many times it works. And it just shows you the true magic of super clean water with super clean, properly made hydrogen, and then properly used hydrogen. I mean, that's foundational to my protocols. In fact, I have a lab report right here. So I am a water expert, basically, and a hydrogen expert. And mostly, I've really learned a lot of things, as you can probably imagine. But also a hydrogen generator expert as far as how to generate it is very important. But this is a third-party lab test. And what would shock people, and you know what, there probably won't be shocked, but is a list of all the nasty chemicals in water. And there's pages and pages of this particular lab test. Now, the good news is most people think, hey, if I drink water and I filter it, it's going to be fine. It's not going to be fine, in my opinion, because most water filters, my video 388, all my videos are numbered. I specifically explained the different types of water filtration. So I know every water filtration modality that exists and what it can and cannot do. Pretty much almost all water filters will not eliminate everything, especially parasites, viruses, and bacteria and mold. Most water filters just can't do all that. They can minimize it a lot of times, but they can't get it all out except for one method. And I discovered this, again, I always follow the science, but I also observe nature. And so this is how nature does it. But even if I were to give you like an example here, have you heard of PFAS? So PFAS are what they call forever chemicals. They're really nasty. Yeah, you probably know about them. So here's the levels that were in the water, 26 and a 7. And after the carbon distillation, which is what I recommend to filter water, 0. Everything goes to a 0, basically, when you do it correctly. And that means all pharmaceuticals, all fluoride, all the garbage in your water. This is the way you clean it. Now, a lot of people are against this method, supposed health gurus, but then in time they change their mind. And that's the thing. Everybody's always arguing about what the best is as far as water. Like people are like, oh, you should drink alkaline water. No, you should drink spring water. And everybody's always arguing. And I got very frustrated when I was trying to find my way. And I do a lot of independent thinking. And I just thought to myself, what do I want out of my water? And what I really wanted was, I just wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be the cleanest water possible. Of course, I learned about hydrogen later, and that was like the magic. I mean, my father was actually a really good example because he didn't want to do all my protocols. He was dealing with stuff that has to do with cholesterol, blood pressure, but diabetes, arthritis was really bad for him, and his glaucoma. And he's like, I don't want to do your protocols because some of my protocols can be pretty involved. I mean, people need healing and it's really difficult sometimes. And so I have different stages of protocols. But my father basically said, look, the only thing that I'm willing to do is do that carbon distiller to clean the water completely. If people want to know what I use, by the way, it's a website called mypurewater.com. And people have discount codes. So if they want a discount, the code is the same name as my channel, Uprising 144K. But you get one of these carbon distillers, which I bought one for my dad. And then I bought him a hydrogen generator, which I'm very picky about. Like, I do not use these, and it's for good reason, but I'm not a fan of these bottles. I know they're like crazy popular, but I'm not a fan. I don't like plated metals, which is what they use. They're all made in China. I don't like the membranes they're using. companies are trying to hide a lot of that information now because I talk about it and they don't like me talking about it, but I'm just about facts, I'm not going to sugarcoat anything. And so anyway, so you have to have a really good hydrogen generator. And I did a massive amount of research and basically became an expert in the field too. And what I learned was the Japanese make the best stuff, not the Chinese, when it comes to hydrogen. And so the machine I use is actually the number one hydrogen machine, not only in the world, but it's the number one in Japan. And that's a big deal. They're literally the hydrogen mecca in Japan. I mean, they know a lot about the subject. They also know a lot about water, actually. And so anyway, in Japan, I found this really good device. If people want to see it also, people get curious. The official website, so you actually can, you're going to the right place. It's called holyhydrogen.com. And so anyway, that was foundational. And I did that for my dad because I remember my dad basically said, I'm not going to do anything because I don't want to change my diet. I don't want to change the way I live, And he said, the only thing that I'm willing to do is do that clean water through the carbon distiller with the hydrogen. And I actually didn't think it would work, but I like to be positive. So I started thinking to myself, hey, let's see if it does work. Even though he still wants to eat his cheeseburgers and grab a beer and have French fries and go out to eat a lot and travel and all this kind of stuff. So he did it, and it was absolutely shocking to me when all those conditions went away. The one that was probably the most, well, I think I was the most shocked, but I would say that one of his doctors was extremely shocked, specifically his eye doctor, because he's like, your glaucoma is gone. You've been coming to us for over 3 decades. There's no way that it's gone. He didn't even believe his own results. So he actually had my father come back in and get retested. He did this like 3 times. And then after that, he's like, this is ridiculous. I know you have glaucoma. You keep testing negative. So they ended up making an appointment with like a specialist. It took like half a year to get an appointment. It was a really big deal. And they were just shocked. They said, glaucoma doesn't get better with age. And in this case, it didn't just get better. It like disappeared. And so it was shocking. And he was able to get off all these other medications that he was on too. He was off of all pharmaceuticals, especially the one for his arthritis was very concerning to me. And of course, I found out later through Japanese research that hydrogen appears to be also very anti-aging. And so for me, it made perfect sense that if something's very anti-aging, a lot of medical issues would also go away. And we're not talking about something that has like 5 studies or 20 studies. I mean, hydrogen in Japan, I believe the numbers, I mean, they're moving a lot every day, but I believe there are a little over 2,000 studies at this point. I mean, that's a lot of data that really shows the magic of hydrogen. And we are talking about specifically molecular hydrogen. A lot of people are like, oh, I use hydrogen peroxide. And it's like, that's not the same type of hydrogen. Not only that, hydrogen peroxide is actually one additional oxygen molecule. It's actually very oxidizing, which you don't particularly want in this case. And I mean, that's the whole reason that when you get cut, you put it on there because oxidation will kill things. So you kill a bacteria, prevent an infection. And I know all about, hydrogen peroxide, but it's very different than molecular hydrogen. And I did both when I was very sick. I tried everything under the sun. That's why I found out what worked and what didn't. And that's how I found out that a lot of people, again, not to name names, but a lot of people out there that claim that certain things work and never saw them work for me. I've never seen them work for, a lot of other people. And I just found out that the whole health industry, both alternative health and Western medicine, this is my opinion, by the way, but the majority of it, I'm not going to say all of it, but the majority of it is just not what we're being told, in my opinion. And so I had to embark on my own journey. And
all right, well, tell us a little bit about that journey. What were some of the biggest health challenges you faced before discovering hydrogen therapy?
I had a ton of them. I mean, I had autoimmune issues that were causing severe inflammation all over my body. It must have been weakening something like a ligament or joints because I would have so much joint pain. I literally couldn't even work the remote control on a television. That's how bad it hurt. And I literally couldn't walk. I was bedridden most of the time. And then I would have little times where I could kind of walk, but, and so these things were happening and it was pretty bad. But the real major stuff too, on top of that was I did have some tumors in my body. And then on top of that, my liver and my kidneys were not really optimal. In fact, this autoimmune issue that I appeared to have, but these gut issues also, which in my opinion is where autoimmune issues tend to come from. I had a lot of gut issues and my immune system was garbage. I mean, I'd get sick so easily and it would take me forever to recover. And then when I would recover, I could get sick within a week or two all over again. And it was hell. I mean, it was a really bad place. And then on top of all of that, I had the one that was bothering me the least of all things is the one that apparently was supposed to kill me, I'm not supposed to be alive right now, was a major heart condition that I had. So my cardiologist, I mean, I've known that I had a heart condition for a very long time, because every time I went to the doctor, they're like, your heart doesn't sound right, and they would tell me every single time. I'm like, I got it, it's fine, whatever. And I just lived like that, expecting that one day I would just, whatever, maybe die. And when I really got some really good insurance, I finally went to a cardiologist and he checked everything. And there's a lot of scans and things that they did, and they could see the heart, in vivo. And basically, after all that, he's like, man, your heart's like a mess. He's like, you would be lucky if you had 10 years. And so he said, you're probably going to need surgery. We have to figure it out, blah, 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 right? I want to do some more testing, and so we went through all that. And it was literally right around that time that I was kind of discovering hydrogen, and I was doing some of these things already. I was kind of lining them up because I did a lot of stuff in regards to like trying different diets and the supplements and all these devices that everybody wants to sell you. And they didn't work. In fact, nothing was really working. And it was really heartbreaking because I was putting so much effort and a lot of fasting. And it was so brutal. I mean, I lost my job. I couldn't even work anymore. And so it was a real struggle. And then when I really found the right hydrogen, because I actually did try like the little bottles. I tried hydrogen tablets, which I just do not recommend anymore at all, based on things that I've learned about them. And I tried all sorts of stuff, out there, and nothing was working. And when I followed the data, which is really what I tend to do now, and do a lot of my own individual, thinking, is that basically the data led me to Japan. I'm here, I'm looking at all this scientific data. And I mean, the Japanese were literally, and still are, they're literally using this in university hospitals. So, I mean, this is really legit. So I was like, okay, how am I going to get my hands on hydrogen? How do I even know how to use it? There's so many questions. And that's why I had to teach myself. I have a background in education, and I was all self-taught, really. It took a long time. And basically, once I figured it all out, I started making the hydrogen actually correctly and properly. I started obviously filtering my water properly. And I just going through this process. And by the time I went back to the cardiologist the next time, he was shocked. My heart condition was gone, on top of all these other issues that I was having. And so it was shocking. Even I was shocked. I was like, could this be real? Did you make a mistake? He's like, there's no mistake. We have recorded your heart condition before. Now you're showing fine. He's like, no way. And not only that, I had the condition for a very long time. So that was basically the gist of a lot of my quote unquote medical issues that I was able to resolve. And my gut got way better. My immune system is way better. All these things have really changed dramatically. And so and more stuff on top of it, which I don't talk about a lot, but like cognitive function, like my brain. I don't know how I remember. There's so many things that I just pull up so easily now, and it's kind of shocking actually. Sometimes you're just like, wow, okay, I remember that. That's cool. But based on some new stuff that I'm uncovering, I'm not kidding when I say that I really think that what I'm doing, these protocols and this hydrogen technology, I really think that it not only can improve neurological and brain function. I actually think it can increase intelligence, as crazy as that sounds. There's a lot of things that I believe that a lot of these protocols can do, which I think are extremely shocking. And I have more. In fact, I've come up with so many more great ideas since hydrogen. So it's almost like, what happened? I feel like a little switch flipped in my head, because here's another interesting little example. But have you ever seen this book or heard of this book?
No, I haven't. And he's holding up, for the listeners, he's holding up the hidden passages in water. Oh, hidden messages.
No,
I can't even read. I maybe need hydrogen to clear up I got my contacts in. I don't know what's going on.
And it's funny that you say that, because that's another thing that I've observed, even with my dad. All of a sudden he stopped using glasses. And I was like, I never seen him with glasses on. I have found that I can help basically get your vision better. I was like, why would this do that? Because your eyes are actually connected to your brain. They kind of are a part of your brain. And so all this brain function improvement, the eyes seem to go along with it. This is the thing that I've been noticing through all these years of my work. But the hidden messages in water it sounds like a Looney Tunes story, because basically it's a book that talks about how you can talk to water, how you can play music to water, how you can think thoughts to water and measure its reaction. And it's unbelievable, because what this guy proved, and by the way, who did it? A Japanese guy. I'm telling you, the Japanese understand water more than anyone I've ever seen in the world. It's unbelievable. And so anyway, the magic of water is, in my opinion, very powerful. And a lot of people don't even know that the word hydrogen actually means that which becomes water. So hydrogen is even the precursor of water. And it's so special if you do it correctly, if you make it properly, if you use it properly, and that's the key. Because I literally just talked to a guy yesterday who's been taking those hydrogen tablets actually, and they were telling me that they haven't seen anything. In fact, they saw their kidneys getting worse. They were doing it for kidney issues, and they were trying to get help from me because I actually helped my own brother who had kidney problems. He was about to get on dialysis. His kidneys were shot. All doctors will tell you in the medical establishment that you can't fix kidneys. That's pretty much what you're told. Well, I created a protocol for kidneys, and I saw it work with my brother. I wasn't sure if it would, but when I saw it work, I'm like, clearly the protocol works. And I've seen it work for others. And so this guy contacted me about his kidney issues. He was taking the hydrogen tablets, and I was like, don't do that. I said, this is not what you want to do for your kidneys. And he goes, well, it is a little ironic that you're saying that because my kidneys would only be good. And he goes, and I'm not even feeling that great. And I said, yeah, you don't want to take that. Hydrogen's supposed to be odorless, colorless, tasteless, and pH neutral, all which the pills don't do. They have color to them. They have taste to them. They kind of stink, actually. They have like a smell. Smells like it's burnt. And it alters the pH dramatically. It actually makes the water very acidic. So here, remember we used to have all these people preaching about alkaline water. Now everybody's telling you about these hydrogen makes the water super acidic. And again, everybody's always changing their tune depending on what they're trying to sell. And it is very frustrating. But, with the hydrogen that I make, which the Japanese followed all the science, it is odorless, it is colorless, it is pH neutral. It's done the right way. It's done the way that a university hospital in Japan would do it. So that's the important part. You're not just buying a little Chinese bottle thinking, hey, this is going to fix all my problems. I don't want to give people false expectations. And in my opinion, it's just kind of a waste of money, and they just end up in a landfill. And so there's a lot to educate on hydrogen, and that's what I've been doing for.
So how did you come to hydrogen? How did you begin implementing hydrogen in your health routine? And what were the most immediate changes you noticed?
Well, first I started reading this. I stumbled upon the scientific data because one of the things that I wanted to do when I was creating my protocols is I looked to a lot of places. I looked to nature, I looked at science, I did a lot of critical thinking, and just used all the knowledge that I've gained throughout my life too. And I put it all together in trial and error. And then eventually I stumbled upon the hydrogen research too. And I thought it was a scam, is what I thought. When I read it, I'm like, this has got to be a scam. I didn't even understand it. And it kept coming up, and my health conditions were only getting worse. And then I got desperate, and I was like, okay, I'm doing super terrible. I've read about this hydrogen stuff. I started looking at where the data was coming from, and it was very legitimate places, again, in Japan. And I was like, okay, this stuff's starting to look pretty legitimate. And then I thought, well, I want to try it. And you can't go to your corner drugstore and go buy hydrogen. So then that's when I started having to look about how you make it. And then that's when I started learning that there's different ways to make it. And then I started learning about byproducts that are produced, like contaminants, when making different types of hydrogen. And then that's the part where, it upsets a lot of people. And I'll apologize for that because I know that typically when it affects someone's pocketbook, people get upset. And I understand that. The sad part is that I made a promise I made a prayer actually when I was at my lowest point, and I just prayed for God to help guide me and help me figure out this medical issue. And I promised that if I were to figure it out, that I would help others and share it with others. And so I've always done that. So I've kept to that promise. So instead of I've been offered, I'm sure you know, but I've been offered by many companies. They want me to promote their products, their supplements, different stuff. And I never will. And I've turned down actually a lot of money, but I've always adhered to what got me better and the protocols that I still follow to this day. So I don't just, promote a bunch of stuff. And so yeah, but basically after reading all the scientific data, I started, learning again how to make the different types of hydrogen. And I was trying different hydrogen, and I wasn't getting any better. In fact, actually, a lot of times I was actually getting worse. So I was very confused by that, but I kept learning. And obviously, I eventually learned that how you make hydrogen matters and how you actually use it matters. And that's when I really started, seeing the benefits. And it was a little slow going. Hydrogen is not like a miracle thing that you just, take a glass once and you're done. but it is in nature. And that's the other thing. The way that I filter water is the way nature does it. In fact, I don't know. Do you know how nature filters
I'm
water?
thinking basically, water running down a stream, running through the rocks and that kind of stuff. So,
Well, that's what most people think. It's a little ironic that people don't realize that the purification of water actually starts with hydrogen, which means the sun. Our sun is made up of almost entirely hydrogen. I mean, it's also made up of helium, but helium is basically hydrogen. And so the sun hits the ocean, and when the water gets hot, the steam rises. And through the ascension process of the water is very spiritual, by the way. This is something that, as crazy as it sounds, that's actually why I showed you this book, because I don't want to sound all crazy, because I'm a real data-driven guy and I'm a real skeptic. But I will tell you, I think you can literally communicate with water. As crazy as that sounds, I mean, this Japanese guy, everybody thought that he was absolutely nuts, including me. He really did some very good work with the hidden messages in water. And he proved that water has memory and there is a communication with it. And I experienced it. I mean, by doing hydrogen all these years, it almost literally feels like it's talking to me. I know that sounds wild, but there's like information within it that has been in there since the beginning of time. And there's so much in there. And I have so many things I want to do with that information. That's another long story, because I literally have a device that I believe could potentially take care of any medical condition in existence and help the human body live a super long time, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, if not potentially into the thousands. But that's something that, is going to take time and a lot of funding to create such a device, because, it'd probably be somewhere in the neighborhood of 30, maybe $50 million, and it would require a lot of specialists and whatnot. But anyway, not to, get back on that, but water is, again, very spiritual. And so as it ascends because of the sun hitting it, that actually purifies it, because through the distillation is what we would call it, right? Process, it leaves all the impurities behind. So what people don't realize is that all the snow that's fallen on mountains that comes down later as a stream, as you're saying, all the snow and rain is actually distilled water. That's what it is. And so when I looked at the scientific evidence, like I showed you that third-party lab test, and I looked at every water filtration modality in existence, that was the only one that completely purifies your water. And I've even created protocols using it. And I always caution people, do not ever do my protocols if you're not using the exact water that I'm talking about, or even the hydrogen. Because if you do it wrong, and I've seen it cause problems. And people can even literally die. Like, I'll give you an example. Have you ever heard of the neti pot? Oh, I've never heard of the neti pot. It's like a little pot that when you have a sinus congestion, you pour it through your sinuses. You can literally die from using that thing if you don't read the directions. And I'll tell you why. The directions specifically say to use distilled water. Why would it say? Because any other water can have a virus, a bacteria, a parasite, mold, or God knows what other pharmaceutical or any contaminant. And you run it through your sinuses, and there have been people who've literally gotten like a parasite in their brain. They don't even know, and it's literally eating away at their brain. And 6 months later, all of a sudden, they can't think straight. You go to a doctor, and they're like, you got this in your brain. It's crazy, right? And so the kind of water you use matters. And I have protocols, for example, for the eyes. We were talking about your eyes for a second there. And you would never want to follow them unless you're making the water the way that, in my opinion, is the best way, carbon distillation, and the right type of hydrogen. I would not use an inferior or cheap device for these type of protocols because of the concerns. These Chinese products are using like plated metals. The machine from Japan does not use plated metals, and it does it for a reason. I'm sure you know about plating, what ends up happening with plated metals, especially when you're running electricity through it with water. I mean, that's literally how they make like colloidal silver, because they want to get the metal in the water. When you're making hydrogen, you don't want metal in your water. You want it really, really pure, again, in my opinion. And so anyway, kind of the process of how nature purifies water, to really answer that question. And so that's how I learned a lot of things. And hydrogen is found in nature. Have you ever heard of a place called Lourdes, France, or Lourdes, France? So basically, they've discovered, obviously people are like, oh, these miracle healings, right? At Lourdes, France. That water got tested so many times. And a lot of people, basically everybody said, it's just water. There's nothing magical about it. We don't know why it's doing what it's doing, until the Japanese. The Japanese are they're really amazing people. I love different cultures and different people. And I think you can learn from everyone. You can learn from an old man. You can even learn from a 5-year-old. Sometimes they might say something that's like, oh, but I never thought of that. I love to learn. And the Japanese are unbelievable. And the detail, and they're the ones that ultimately discovered that the water in Lord's Friends appears to actually have very high levels of molecular hydrogen, which is exactly the hydrogen we're talking about. That's when they started doing studies in Japan on like mice. And I even have footage of that. I wish I had it to show it to you. It's unbelievable. And so they started seeing all the unbelievable results of hydrogen. And that's how it all really, quote unquote, got started. But again, you're observing nature and you're just trying to mimic it the best way possible, which is the device that I used. In fact, the number one device in Japan, the Holy Hydrogen one, they did the most natural hydrogen I've ever seen. Because like these bottles are basically electrolyzing the water. So when electricity and water come in contact with, certain things, there's a reaction. And a lot of times it's not really what you would want. And so the way that the Japanese did it is they have two separate chambers and they extract the hydrogen gas from one and then they dissolve it in the other one. The one that you're actually going to drink, no, it was never electrolyzed. There was no electricity went through it, and it makes it a very safe method of doing hydrogen. The top two methods are basically hydrogen gas injection. That's the second best way. The way that I do it is the number one way, but it's the most difficult and typically the most expensive. Except that this guy who invented it basically in Japan, he got a lot of help too. It is not the technology that it takes as far as metal technology, the membranes that they developed. They made breakthroughs too. Like they literally structure the hydrogen. It like looks like DNA. It's unbelievable. Nobody's ever structured hydrogen before ever. They're the only company in the world that's ever done this up to date, and so much more. They did a lot of things, and that's the one that really turned on the magic for me. That's the one that not only my heart condition went away, obviously I had huge improvements, and then the cognitive stuff. For me, the cognitive stuff, if you would have told me that years ago, I would have been like, whatever. I'm such a skeptic that I just wouldn't have believed it. And it didn't really start kicking in, like for me, like in a very powerful way until like, I don't know, 4 years in, 3.5, 4 years in. And so it took a while because hydrogen, just like anything, like you don't go from being 150 pounds to 450 pounds overnight. These things take time. And if you want to lose that weight, you're not going to do it overnight either. It takes time. So health is something that takes time. So when I have I've had so many people ask me, so am I supposed to drink this clean water every day? Am I supposed to have hydrogen every day? Can't I just have it once, like an antibiotic or something and be done with it? And I'm like, look, do you have to eat every day? If you eat healthy every day, is it going to make a difference? Yeah, you can't just eat healthy one day. You can't just drink water one day. It's a lifestyle. And that's what I created. I created this lifestyle protocol. And it's actually very simple. It's really not so complicated. I mean, even my father was able to follow it and he loved it. And it wasn't just him. It was so funny because my mom was a huge skeptic. She's like, there's no way your dad's going to get better with water and this hydrogen stuff. She did not believe. She's like me. She was a university professor, by the way. So she's very logical. I was the same way, huge skeptic. But if you really look at the science, it's really legitimate, again, in my opinion. And then when we saw the stuff go away, my mom became a believer and she started using it too. And then she got her results. Her results were pretty unbelievable. I don't know if I need to go through that unless you want me to, but I've seen it work. I've seen it work for years now. It's something unbelievable.
When I think of hydrogen, I start thinking of hydrogen cars and, that potential. What is different between the hydrogen that I might put in a vehicle and the hydrogen I might put in my body?
Well, the biggest thing is going to be, there's a lot of differences potentially, but the biggest thing is purity. So remember, and I'm sure you've heard this, like for example, oxygen. If you're in a hospital and you need oxygen, which by the way is oxidizing and not super good for you all the time. I know a lot of people hate that statement. I'm not saying there's no benefit to oxygen, but the benefits are short-lived and then you got to be cautious. You have to know how to use oxygen. It can be very dangerous. I just got to put that out there for people. When you get oxygen, which is a gas, when you get it in a hospital, it's medical grade oxygen. I don't think people understand what that even means. Do you know what that means?
Probably not exactly. I just assume, that it's the purest form of oxygen and there's nothing else in it.
That's exactly it. It has to do with its purity. So you really want to really pure. And that's my big gripe with hydrogen these days. I'm like, it's got to be pure, and it saddens me when I see people, they want to use it, they don't really understand it. And almost everybody that I've ever spoken about is already doing it the wrong way in my opinion. So then, I have to re-educate and every single time. But basically it's a gas. And so a super high pure gas. And then there's certain percentages. So another one is, for example, medically, And the machine that I use, again, the Holy Hydrogen machine, it makes it at a 2% concentration. But it does it because at 2%, hydrogen is not flammable. So this is important because now it's safe for home use. Once you get to 4% and higher, roughly, it's going to become flammable. And that's very dangerous. I've heard of people from somebody that I know who worked in hydrogen, and he was telling me how many people there has been deaths and serious injuries from people doing it the wrong way. And, there's a spark somewhere or somebody doesn't know or understand this, and it caused some bad problems. And so everything that I'm actually following and doing is actually the Japanese medical establishment's numbers. I'm not going by the Chinese. I'm not going by anyone. I'm going by the Japanese because, in my opinion, they are the professionals. They are the ones who discovered it. They have more experience than anybody in the world. And so, but hydrogen's high. So, I think that there are similarities to what they use in cars. I just think that the biggest thing would be purity. And sometimes how you make it really matters. So the extraction method. But I've seen those cars too, and I think it's really cool. Some of them use certain technologies that they don't divulge the bad parts of the technology, but there are some that are not necessarily super good, in my opinion. But that's a whole other thing because in time, we will develop technology to be able to extract and get hydrogen basically super cheap, borderline free almost. And I believe that hydrogen will change the world of health. Pharmaceuticals, which it already has. I don't know if I'm allowed to say certain pharmaceutical words, but I could share some information if I'm allowed to. I also believe it'll change the world of agriculture. It's going to definitely change the world of athletics, and it's going to change the world of energy. So hydrogen is the new wave of change that's coming, in my opinion, for humanity.
So what makes hydrogen such a powerful antioxidant? And how does this compare to some of the other well-known antioxidants? Somebody's taking vitamin C or glutathione or some of the other, antioxidants that are pretty popular right now.
Antioxidants are great, but people don't tend to understand. I wish we had a chart that we could show them. Antioxidants are actually come in different sizes. Were you aware of that?
Pretty much, yeah.
Most people, believe it or not, don't know that. They don't know that antioxidants are different sizes. So if you were to look at CoQ10, it'd be like really big. If you were to look at vitamin C, it's pretty big. If you looked at vitamin E, if you looked at glutathione, when you look at these sizes and you compare them to hydrogen, it's no contest. Hydrogen is so tiny that there's no place in your body that can hide from it. It can go anywhere in your body. And to me, hydrogen is light. It's, again, getting very biblical and people talk about living water and they talk about light and eternal life. And, those are very key words used in a lot of ancient scriptures. And basically, you're bringing light into the body. And by the way, your body also produces hydrogen, and your hydrogen production appears to go down as you get older. Much like your stomach acids also go down as you get older. It's a scientific fact. You guys, anybody can read about it. And ultimately, my discovery is obviously you want to bring those hydrogen levels up. And my protocol also entails getting the body to produce more of its own hydrogen too. So that's part of my protocol because hydrogen is so foundational. But the fact that it's so tiny, it does appear to function as an antioxidant, whereas oxygen appears to be an oxidant. So they're literally polar opposites. And water is H2O. So you have your antioxidant, you have your oxidant. Water is those two things. So you're extracting the pure hydrogen is what you're ultimately doing. And when you do this, yes, it appears to work as an anti-inflammatory, an antioxidant, but what makes it so unique is not just an antioxidant. It appears to be a selective antioxidant, very unique and so tiny that it can literally go all the way to inside the mitochondria, which you're not going to do with CoQ10. You're not going to do it with these bigger molecules. Going to the core of the mitochondria is a really big deal. In fact, one of the very first studies was actually from a mitochondrial expert, and he saw the effects of hydrogen on mitochondria. That's why people get energy from it. So without caffeine, without sugar, without whatever, hydrogen appears to give people really more energy. And a lot of medical issues, it's going to be learned more and more, and I don't think most people realize this, and even doctors. Most medical issues also have to do with like a dysregulation of your mitochondria. And basically metabolism. So metabolic disorders, metabolic dysfunction. And so that's one of the reasons that I believe that it also works. But I think that we have our bodies are so out of balance as far as oxidation, oxidative stress, ROS, reactive oxygen species, all this oxygen stuff, right? These free radicals that create so much damage. And the Japanese discovered there's so many medical conditions. They literally had all the pharmaceutical drugs next to all these medical conditions. I was able to see their their charts. The list of pharmaceuticals next to almost 200 medical conditions, it was a little under that. The list of pharmaceuticals was so massive. I mean, it was way bigger than all the medical conditions. It was so huge because you take one pill for this, you take another pill for this, or you take this for a side effect of that. And you have all these pills. And then hydrogen, just one little tiny little thing they discovered was having a positive effect on all these medical conditions, even working oftentimes better than the pharmaceutical itself. And they couldn't understand it. Even the Japanese were like, this doesn't make any sense. We have all these drugs to do all these things. How can one thing do it all? It doesn't make any sense. But what they ultimately discovered, this is their discovery, that roughly 97 and 98% of all disease comes down to free radical damage. If you have a lot of free radicals in your liver, it's going to look like, some type of liver damage or liver condition. If you have too many free radicals in the brain, on and on and on it goes. And hydrogen seems to be really good at liberating the body of a lot of free radicals. And so it's truly amazing. I mean, truly remarkable and so simple. It's simple like water, but it's complex in the sense that you can't just say, oh, well, water, okay, I'll just drink some tap water. And it's like, no, you don't want to drink tap water because not all water is created equal. And that's also a big message of mine, is that not all hydrogen is created equal. Just like all supplements aren't created equal, just like every vegetable grown out there is not all created equal. Which one's GMO'd, which one are they spraying the crap out of, there's so many factors. And so it's been an interesting journey to try to figure all this out.
So you mentioned mitochondria, and, I think I teach exercise physiology, so we're always talking about the electron transport chain and how important that is in NADH and producing adenosine triphosphate. So I'm kind of picturing you have these hydrogen ions transported in the mitochondria without the NAD or the NADH rather, and that can actually produce energy of and by itself. Is that kind of what you're talking about? Is how cellular energy is produced with hydrogen?
Not really. I think that what's really happening is anytime your body is bogged down by free radical damage, your cells are not going to work properly. So if you can liberate the cell or even your body, obviously, of free radical damage, they start running on all cylinders. It's kind of like having a V8 car and maybe you're putting crappy gas in it. Maybe one spark plug is old or clogged, whatever it is. But once you eliminate, it's not that you have to rebuild the whole engine. Once you eliminate the very thing that's getting in the way, now the engine starts running properly again. That's kind of the way that I see it, because oxidative stress, again, is a form of oxygen, in my opinion. This is the way that I see it, to try to simplify it to understand, is oxygen. Hydrogen has an affinity to oxygen. That's why they produce water, And in fact, hydrogen cars, that's one of the things that typically comes out the tailpipe is water, from using up this hydrogen, because it's a gas that is flammable, right, to produce energy. And so basically, when hydrogen goes in the body, I really think that the most simple way to put it is, I think it just neutralizes these free radicals, this oxidative stress, and it just neutralizes it, and it turns to water, and the body eliminates it. It's one of the things that I found a lot of when I was first starting hydrogen and really following the proper protocols, and not just me. Across the board, everybody makes the same comment. They're like, man, I'm peeing a lot more. And that typically only happens at the beginning, I've noticed. Because then once the body starts getting more into homeostasis and balance, I'm doing some crazy things with my body in regards to I've been getting a lot of blood work, and the doctors are shocked. I had this doctor call me after she saw my blood work. She was a blood specialist of over 30 years. And she said she'd never called a patient like she was calling me. She said, I had to call you. I was real nervous first because in the medical establishment, we know that when you get a call, it's typically not good news. And I thought she was going to give me bad news. And she said, I'm calling because I have never in my life seen blood like yours, ever. And she said, it's so unbelievable. I had to call you. She said, I want to know what you're doing because I want to apply it to my patients. And then this is when she really opens up. Remember, I told you a lot of people ask me who are supposed to understand health, you're a doctor. Her own daughter was sick and she couldn't get her daughter fixed up. And then it turns out that she was having some of her own issues. And so many of her patients, and she told me straight up, she said, I'm just not able to help them. I've tried, I fail, and I see your blood work, and I'm like, how did you accomplish this? Because a lot of the things that I can see on your blood work, which, by the way, I'm really big on overcoming what I call nutritional deficiencies. Because most people aren't even aware that almost everyone in America is most likely nutritionally deficient in something. Okay, it's very common. And it's a scientific fact. This is why it boggles my mind that doctors don't talk about this. And people are starting to talk about it more. I've been talking about it for so many years. I think it finally got out that we know that when you have certain deficiencies, it can lead to certain diseases. So like, for example, like deficiency in vitamin C, you get scurvy, right? In order to fix scurvy, you don't take a pharmaceutical. You get your vitamin C levels right, and then you're fine. And the way that this clicked in my head is I have this body, and I don't know if I'm deficient in some. This was a long time ago. So I started trying to learn and understand how to overcome nutritional deficiencies. The problem is people take, like, this is what the doctor was saying. She's like, I give people vitamins. I give people stuff. Why are they still deficient? She said, what are you doing that's so different than what they're doing? What she didn't realize is that my protocol, she actually got really shocked. I don't like to talk about diet a lot because people kind of get weird about it. But she was shocked when she asked me what kind of diet I eat. And I don't like to talk about it a lot, but I did tell her some of the stuff I do as far as diet. And I don't eat meat. She just about lost her mind because he's like, it's impossible. She says, you have to understand this. She said, it's impossible that your blood looks like this and you don't eat meat. She goes, it's not possible. And then she said, wait a second, how long have you been on this diet or whatever, And she said, like 6 months. And I'm like, it's really been more like a decade. And she's like, a decade? And see, because what I basically figured out, and there is some science to support this, though a lot of people don't read about it. I believe, and I think my blood work proves it, I've been able to teach my body. Did you know your body can produce its own vitamins? I mean, that's nuts. I transform my gut. It not only helps me produce my own vitamins, certain percentage, like 30 something odd percent of like maybe some B vitamins, for example, but I also get my body to be very efficient at absorbing nutrients, like really efficient. So I also have anti-parasitic protocols. In fact, my lifestyle is very anti-parasitic. It's one of the reasons that I stay away from meat, because I've seen a lot of lab tests on meat, and literally every single test always comes up positive for fecal matter. You go buy meat anywhere and you test it, it will come up positive for fecal matter. And animals are constantly being given typically, antibiotics, antiparasitics, because they're trying to control these levels, but they've inadvertently created, in my opinion, based on a lot of research that I've done, they create superbugs. And they literally have proof that some people have eaten, for example, an animal, a steak or something, and within 20 to 30 minutes, those quote unquote super bacteria or even parasites already begin to have an effect on the body. And so I really went a whole different protocol. And I know some people are like, but I can't survive without meat. That's fine. I mean, there are different ways of getting the nutrients from meat too. For example, broths. So you can put it in water and you use the magic. Again, water's magic. You can use the water to pull the nutrients out of the bone, out of the meat. And I have eaten broths like that. And so I've done a lot of these things, but in the end, really caused me to overcome, in my opinion, again, all these nutritional deficiencies. That's one of the things that I'd like to get tested for. And that's one of the things that she noticed. And she said, this is nuts. I've never seen anybody's blood look like this. I even had the lab, because I used to go in pretty regularly. They started telling me, did you know your blood looks different than everybody else's? And I'm like, it's just red. She goes, no, after we get your blood and we put it with all these other people's blood, because it's this lab. By the time it gets to wherever it's going, they always notice yours. They said, yours looks different. After so much time goes by, like a lot of people's blood there's so much fat in it and even sugar that it looks different after you give it time to cool down. And they said that mine looked just so different that they started realizing it was the same person. And that's why they're like, who the heck is this and what the heck is he doing? And the doctor who asked me about it, it was really kind of funny because I didn't want to explain to her. How am I going to start explaining my protocols? I mean, I do consults. I'm very selective about who I do consults with, but I do consults for people who really need the help, who are serious about transforming their life. My protocols are not that strict, but some people they don't have any willpower. and it's so hard for them to change. And so I don't like to explain myself to somebody for half an hour and just waste time. And so this doctor wanted me to explain things to her. And I was like, I'm not going to tell you. It's just too time consuming. But she kept pushing. So I started. I never got to finish because all I did was start. And she stopped me. She's like, what? You got to purify your water like this. You got to put this hydrogen in it. I didn't even get into the diet part. And she stopped me because she said, none of my patients are going to do this. Nobody's going to, start making these changes. She said, I thought you were just taking some secret supplement, like some special supplement I thought you were taking. And I will tell you that I'm not actually a big believer in supplements. This goes contrary to all the other health gurus that always are pushing some supplement. I use virtually almost no supplements. The only thing that I use primarily is I use this powder from a company called Purium. I guess if people want to know the website, it's ishoppurium.com. And I think you get a discount code again with the code Uprising 144K if they want. But the product is called Power Shake. And all it is a bunch of superfoods in a powder. But they're really high purity. That's why they call themselves pure. It has to do with purity because there's a lot of products out there that I've learned they cut corners. And yes, that's how you get a product cheaper. But I wanted the best, because when it comes to your health, you just can't put a price on it. So, anywho, so that's what I actually use. I put them in these smoothies. And that's one of the things I use for my nutrients. So it's just food, and I add it with more food because we already know food's deficient. The soil's deficient, your minerals are deficient. So I do all this, and then I do add vitamin D is the only thing in its ionic form. It's a specific type of vitamin D. Almost nobody makes it like this. Very high purity in its ionic form, and of course it's D3 with K2. And I put it with some other things. I create a smoothie, a special smoothie. And between the clean water, the hydrogen, and these like super smoothies that I make, that's the magic. It's not super complicated, but it does take, 20, 25 minutes every morning. I go through this process of making my smoothies and drinking my water and all this type of stuff. And I never would have expected it to work the way it did. I mean, all the science made a lot of sense. In fact, some of the stuff I was doing, there was no science yet. Now there is. So I think it's kind of ironic that a lot of the stuff that I've been doing for years is now being studied and proving that I was right kind of all along. Because one of the things that I do is I add minerals they extract almost all the salt. See, people are really big on salt. The data doesn't show that salt's that good for you. The Japanese have a lot of data on salt, and the data is like clear as day. But minerals are good, and that's what Japanese have realized. It's the minerals that you want. And so I get this product that they extract almost all the salt, but they keep all the minerals. And I was putting those minerals in my smoothie. See, most people think that you got to put it in your water. The reason that I put it in the smoothie is because they actually interact with the fiber of the food that I'm putting in the smoothie. And now the data shows, it's kind of ironic, a study that they did on exactly what I was doing. I couldn't believe I found a study that literally it's like they copied my videos. And basically what it showed was they were shocked. They didn't expect the result because they were looking for something else, but they found that people's bones were rebuilding. And how are people's bones rebuilding? And part of the magic of nutrient absorption, yes, it's the hydrogen. Yes, it's hydration with clean water, but fiber is the secret. And not a fiber supplement, but actual food. So, I cut up carrots, I cut up celery, I cut up beets, I put a bunch of greens. I make this smoothie concoction that fills me up, tastes really good, full of fiber, full of minerals, full of vitamins. And that's really been one of the huge secrets. And it is so good for your gut flora. And so that's a huge part of how I've done a lot of those transformations.
So what about hormone imbalances in the endocrine system and the endocrine health? How can hydrogen therapy assist in managing the endocrine system?
Well, I believe there's actually is already data on that also. I haven't specifically read that data that much because I was kind of focused on other things. Do you know some of the diseases that endocrine problems cause?
A lot of them.
And the big question would be, is it free radicals that are causing the problem? So we go back to that. See what I mean? To me, it really ends up being a lot about free radicals and really a lot to do with your gut and purity. Purity is so big. I can't emphasize it enough. I mean, I used to be one of those guys, to be honest, that I was living off of 99-cent cheeseburgers. That was me, or a 99-cent chicken burger, whatever. I would always swing by McDonald's or Burger King. That was basically the way that I lived. And I was obviously super broke, when I was young, and you're just trying to buy something cheap that fills you up. And that's just the way that I was living. Now, I mean, I would have never wanted to buy greens. Just a little thing of greens cost me more than a hamburger. I would have never done that in my life. I'm not just going to sit there and eat these greens. Who does that? That's why I created the smoothie, by the way, because there's no way I would eat all that stuff. So I put it all in the smoothie, and ironically, it really worked. And I tried juicing, and I'm not going to say I'm against it, but I never do it because juicing is super expensive. You have to buy massive amounts of produce, and you're getting rid of all the fiber, all this magic, And so I'm not a huge fan of juicing. I mean, they're great, and I'll have one once in a while, but I prefer the smoothies with all this stuff. And I think that I buy everything literally as much as I can organic. It's got to be organic. I want to avoid the pesticides, the herbicides. And I believe that was a huge part of my protocol too, is just trying to purify this garbage out of the body. Again, fix all those nutritional deficiencies, be hydrated with clean water that's not full of, if I were to go over these lab tests in more detail, all the stuff that you would see is just mind-boggling. You're like, we're drinking this stuff every day? It's just, I think it's insane, really. I mean, and then people wonder why they get sick. I mean, nobody would have, most people don't really think, I've talked to so many people who also say, oh, I'm on well water. I just had this conversation on another consult I did yesterday. I'm on well water. It's a really great well. It must be great. Of all the lab reports that I've seen in different waters throughout the nation, well water tests the worst. That's like the worst. It's so shocking. I thought it was going to test the best, but this is why we have to look at data, right? And so I was shocked to find out that well water, I saw the worst results, and you really want to purify. Whatever water you get, in my opinion, these days, I always run it through my carbon distiller to really purify the water the way that nature does it, and science backs it up. And so I really think that would have a very positive effect on the endocrine
Now you're
system
making me wonder
personally.
about the water I had when I was in undergrad. I actually started in geology before I discovered exercise physiology, and I did my geology field camp in the Greenbrier Mountains in West Virginia, down near Bluefield, West Virginia. And we used to fill our canteens up in this pipe that was sticking right into the limestone in the mountain. Literally the purest water coming out through the mountain that you could possibly drink. I don't know if that's now the purest as I listen to you talk, but it was pretty darn good water. And I'm just curious how pure that was relative to how pure water can actually be.
It's definitely never going to be as pure as if you run it through a carbon distiller, because nature can do the process that I talked about, the distillation process. The problem is, one, we have a lot of pollutants in the atmosphere, and that does, the rain and snow does pick that up. That's one thing. That's just one. Then you have a lot of animals. So animals defecate. They have a lot of parasites, by the way. And those and feces, and these things do actually get in the water. And so the water could potentially be pretty good, pretty clean, pretty awesome. I've done that myself in the past, drinking from supposedly some of the cleanest wells. But like I said, ever since I started really looking at the data, I always run it through a carbon distiller now. And it's been transforming. And not only that, think about this for a second. Let's just say there is some magical well or mountain water somewhere. Most people don't have access to that, right? The good news is that the carbon distillers, at least the ones I use, they're not Chinese. They're a little more expensive, but because they're American and they're of higher quality and they don't break all the time like the Chinese ones. And so I just bought a really good one, and I literally run it like almost 24/7. That thing's always making me water. I mean, it takes 3 to 6 hours to purify 1 gallon of water. So any water filter that you have that just gives you the water immediately, there's just no way that it could purify it completely in 1 second as compared to a carbon distiller that takes hours, 1 drop at a time. And so I'm really, really picky about my water, obviously. And I am kind of a germaphobe. And so understanding what's in my water and what's going in my mouth and in my body, it's just, and I did so many, like even through this process, I went through a lot of cleansings. I was surprised. The stuff that came out of me, again, me being a skeptic, I'm like, there's no way nothing's going to come out. Oh yeah, things come out of you, and it's borderline disturbing. And I remember feeling, this is another one of my theories, and there's data to back it up. The Japanese have extensive knowledge on parasites. And the more I cleansed my body and got these things out, man, I felt so much sharper. I remember one time, literally when it came out of me, it was like instantaneous. It was like something had unplugged from your brain, and I just felt different. And it was so obvious for a guy who's as skeptical as I am. It was very, very impressive, and I was shocked. And then I proceeded to learn everything about parasites, And I don't even know if you're allowed to talk about, are you allowed to talk about like the ivermectin?
I think we can talk about anything we want on the podcast as long as we're not making any medical claims and that kind of stuff. So.
Okay, yeah, I won't make any claims, but what I will say, because people don't understand this, ivermectin it was never ivermectin. It was actually something else before that. So people don't know that it was actually something called ivermectin. And it was the Japanese, again, who created this. They actually transformed ivermectin with hydrogen, by the way. It was hydrogen that transformed it into ivermectin as we know it today. And there's a whole history about it that's really quite fascinating. I'm quite the expert in that one too, because I learned everything about, so I educated myself, obviously, and I learned everything about antiparasitics, how they work. I was actually the very first person to say that it could potentially be good for some of the things it's being used for these days, which I'm not going to name. I actually did that on another show. It was kind of a funny show because it was, they think I'm a prophet. I know that sounds kind of wild, because the reason that this particular show thought I'm a prophet is because I've made predictions And then they ended up coming in true. And so the show's all about profits. And they were like, man, we got to have you on the show because you're literally saying that things were going to happen. And they did. And by the way, I have way more to come. Like I have a lot of, I don't like to call them prophecies, but predictions. I have a lot of predictions that I feel extremely confident about. I know what's coming. And I don't know why it's so obvious to me. Sometimes I honestly feel like it's the hydrogen because I believe that hydrogen transgresses time and space. It was literally, from the very beginning of all of creation, again, all the stars were made of hydrogen. And there's information in hydrogen. There's information in water. We just haven't learned how to tap into it. That's really what it comes down to. And me having these experiences, I'm like, man, I'm going to sound like a Looney Tune because I'm a real data guy. And here I'm talking about water talking to me. It's ridiculous. But again, that's why I showed you that book, which, by the way, many years after the fact that everybody called that guy crazy, they started realizing that it was legitimate. People have been able to, repeat his work, and it's really pretty impressive. And so anyway, now I'm kind of forgot your original question. If I don't know if I answered it or what happened.
I think
there.
we did. Yeah, I kind of lost my question as well. So that's quite all right.
Sorry.
So there are a lot of hydrogen water and inhalation devices that are out on the market. What should somebody look for when they're shopping for a hydrogen generator?
Well, first, you always want to check the metal that they use. If they use stainless steel, stay away. That's probably one of the worst ones you can use. Any gold, I stay away from those too, ironically, because I learned the Japanese actually tried to use gold and they found that it wasn't the best. Plated metals, I stay away anything with plated metals or literally anything from China. I haven't seen one good machine, and I pretty much have seen them all. Everybody out there is making the machines the same way. And those are the big things to look out for. I definitely would stay away from any like hydrogen tablets or even these bottles. It's funny. My own viewers get upset at me because they're like, please recommend a bottle for God's sakes. And I'm telling you, companies would love me to recommend these. And I'm sure there's a lot of money to be made. But why would I recommend something that I don't use for a good reason and then recommend it? I can't do that. I'm not going to be like everybody else. I'm not going to do it. I don't care how much money they offer me because I know how they're making hydrogen with those. And I know that the Japanese actually attempted to make the best hydrogen bottle in the world. Same company, actually. The same company that makes the best hydrogen machine, which they do everything, in my opinion, correctly based on all the data, which is, again, the Holy Hydrogen one. That's the one. Because honestly, this is really kind of crazy, but in my personal opinion, there's only like 3 good hydrogen machines out there. There's literally thousands of them, and only 3 of them are any good, in my opinion. And that's how bad it is. And that goes a lot for like even water filters. I've had laboratories contact me, and I've learned a lot as far as like, I remember they were telling me how many water filters they've tested and how they find contaminants in the filters themselves that are supposed to be cleaning your water, and the water will have potentially certain contaminants in it, even though it's eliminating other potential contaminants. And that's why carbon distillation pretty much uses almost no filter. So typically what I do personally is I'll take water from a reverse osmosis system because they're really cheap. And then I run it through my distiller and I can remove the carbon part. And then it's just cheaper and it keeps my distiller clean. I never have to maintain the thing. I've never cleaned it once and still doesn't need it. I check it all the time. And then your water is just ultra pristine. But those are the things to look out for. If a hydrogen machine mixes oxygen and hydrogen, they call it Brown's gas. I highly do not recommend that either. And there's a lot of claims about that one. That's not what the professionals use in Japan. It's medical grade hydrogen gas. That's it. And then they also use sometimes medical grade oxygen if a patient needs it for whatever reason. But they don't start, mixing them and producing them together with potential impurities. But anything that uses something called lye or sodium hydroxide to produce their hydrogen, no, that's not something I would at all do. I think I've seen machines do that. I think that's the main ingredient in Drano. They even use it now to dissolve human bodies. Yes, the cartels have done it, but I can't even say the word mortuaries. When people pass away, it's one of the options that they even provide now is to use lye to dissolve the body. And people use it to make hydrogen. I just think it's insane. That's when you have a lack of technology. And that's why, look, the technology is going to be a little more expensive to do it right. Like a lot of things, it costs money to do it the right way. But the good news is, it used to be crazy expensive if you wanted to do it the right way. And because of the Japanese and mass production and all that stuff, they really helped make it extremely affordable. So we're not talking $20,000, $30,000. I think we're talking somewhere in the neighborhood of like $2,500 or something, which is for a machine that makes both hydrogen water, by the way, and hydrogen gas inhalation. That's a big deal too. Most devices only do one or the other. And then you get into nanobubbles. Almost nobody talks about that either. The Japanese make the Holy Hydrogen device makes literally the best nanobubbles in the world, in my opinion, again, based on the metal technology that they use and also the membrane technology, but also the computer's important. The computer's like crazy expensive, apparently, because of the way that it has to regulate electrical current. You don't want spikes because these spikes basically can cause damage to these plated metals, to the membranes that they're using. And I don't know, what do you think would happen if you get a spike in electricity and you're using inferior parts and a dysregulation in the electricity?
You're going to leak some of your
happen?
metals and impurities into the water, right?
So that would be my concern. So I'm not making claims, but that's the concern. And of course, I've seen lab reports on inferior cheap membranes too. And once I saw what was in those, I was like, okay, this is nuts. So we have a whole industry that's selling all these products that I would never use. You couldn't pay me to use them. There's no way. I want high purity of my water, of my hydrogen, of my food, of my air. Air is the one thing that is very hard to control. I mean, you can get certain air filters for the house and stuff, but you're out and about, that's a tough one. But everything else is the way that I really thought about it.
So you mentioned both drinking hydrogen water, but also inhaling hydrogen gas. Are they both essential, or is one more optimal than another?
So the way that that's a really good question too, by the way. It's important because the data is so shocking because the doctors or scientists originally thought that inhaling the hydrogen gas would be way better because you get way more of it. Everybody's so obsessed with crazy high levels of hydrogen, but that doesn't even really appear to be what really is the best way to do it. That's what I've learned and what they do actually, and again, the university hospitals, and also just following the data for myself. But they found that the water oftentimes actually really works better, even though it has less hydrogen in it. So there's a magical part about the water. So for me, the hydrogen water is absolutely foundational. Clean water with hydrogen, foundational. The inhalation is another thing that you can do to take it to the next level. But I do like it a lot because of the way that it affects the lungs, the sinuses, the eyes, the brain. But I've created a protocol where both is what I basically the protocol that I created. And then it was copied. It was kind of ironic because no specialist, no scientist, nobody in the world had ever even thought of doing what I did, apparently. And then they copied it and they did some studies on it, and it proved that I was right. It proved that basically if you use the hydrogen water first and then do hydrogen inhalation afterwards, it actually enhances the benefits of hydrogen and does more than either one of these could do on their own. Kind of like, think about water, just in general. Water is made up of two gases. It's made of oxygen and hydrogen. So who would have thought that you put two gases together and all of a sudden you got liquid? So sometimes two things together can be greater than, what do they call the sum of the parts, or however that saying goes. I like both. But if you're going to only do one, I definitely go water. I don't go inhalation like, I'll just do a bunch of inhalation. No, it always starts with water.
So for any of our listeners or viewers who are curious about hydrogen therapy, what advice would you give them about starting or knowing where to start?
Well, first, you can obviously watch my YouTube channel. Everything's there for free. Uprising 144K is the name of the channel. And the biggest advice that I would say is don't try to cut corners because I've seen it a million times, actually. People are like, let me just start with the tablets. They're cheap, right? Let me just start with a cheap little bottle. Let me just see if I feel anything. I really think that it's kind of like water, clean water also. Like if you're going to go for it, go for the best. Don't bother. I mean, I remember I worked with a woman who had diabetes and she had tried the tablets. She had tried the little bottles that I've shown you. And she was going to give up. She said they didn't do anything for her. She said maybe she saw a tiny little difference on her blood glucose, maybe. She didn't really know if it was the hydrogen doing that, but she was going to give up. She found my channel and she said, man, it was a big jump to go from these cheap little items to something that's a little over $2,000. And she said, but I took the plunge because I had heard you talk about this. And she said, it was unbelievable. She said, the results that I got were so good that even her doctor, she actually sent me her medical records. And I did a video on her story and I talked to her a lot because I helped her with protocols. And the doctor couldn't believe it. He literally said that what he was witnessing was worthy of a Nobel Prize. That's what he's told her. And then he said, how did you learn how to do this? And she said, well, there's this guy on YouTube. And he's like, there is no way there's this guy on YouTube. And by the way, this was years ago. It wasn't recent. And he just couldn't believe it. We were able to achieve, she had type 1 diabetes. So type 1 diabetes, I mean, you need insulin. You'll die if you don't have your insulin. She was able to go 4.5 months without insulin. And the doctor said, that's impossible. And you know how many times I've heard a doctor say that now? I can't even remember anymore. He's always like, this is impossible. How are you doing it? And some doctors, it's always funny because some doctors really want to know. And then you get a doctor who's like, oh, you're better. Next. Like, They don't even care. They don't even care how they got better. They don't even ask questions. So it's really interesting throughout all these years that I've been doing this to see how different doctors react and different, supposed biohackers and all this kind of stuff. So,
well, are there any specific health or medical conditions that someone should exercise caution and really consult their doctor before starting hydrogen therapy?
Absolutely. I'm so glad you asked this question too, actually. Yes. You definitely, okay, so obviously you want to consult your physician. Let's hope that they understand hydrogen, but they probably don't. But yeah, still consult your physician because this is what's going to happen. I've seen it happen a million times. I'm not making claims. I'm just sharing some stuff that I've seen. But so I've seen people, for example, they have high blood pressure and they're taking a medication to keep it at a certain level where everybody's happy, doctor's happy, patient's happy. You start doing hydrogen, and what do you think happens? One, your body is starting to, in my opinion, repair, and your blood pressure is now going too low because you're taking a drug that lowers it. And on top of that, your body becomes very efficient. So, and like I said, I can absorb nutrients, really efficiently. And so you start utilizing potentially this medicine more efficiently, and it's working even better than it should, and your blood pressure goes too low. And that's the problem. And I always tell people, I said, if you're going to start hydrogen, if you're on any pharmaceuticals, like for blood pressure, diabetes, monitor your levels. Please, for the love of God, monitor your blood pressure, monitor your blood glucose, monitor your cholesterol level, whatever it is, because what's going to happen if you're doing the right type of hydrogen and you're using it correctly, also proper protocol, otherwise you won't see pretty much anything. I've seen that before too. Your doctor's going to start adjusting your pharmaceutical drugs. So he's, the same thing actually happened with my mom, where basically they're like, oh, your blood pressure's getting too low. Let's back off on the medicine. And then all of a sudden, a little later, oh, it's still going a little too low. Let's back off. And eventually, I've seen a lot of people get off pharmaceuticals. I've seen this a lot. And so again, really shocking. You and I are on a show and you have all these professional medical doctors that went to school forever and they can't seem to figure it out. And it's kind of hilarious at this point, right? That a YouTube guy and just my journey brought me to this. I just never would have thought it in a million years. But yes, I would caution people. And also if you have kidney issues, think about that. If you have kidney issues and you can't drink a ton of water because, of your kidneys, so that's something that you'd want to consider also. And that's where I like to use, I kind of go to I have a special protocol for that too, in regards to getting enough hydrogen in you when you're limited on water. So stuff like that. And if only people who are very serious, I do consults with. And if they really want to, they can email me if they want. But again, just know that you're going to have to be serious. I don't work with people who aren't serious anymore. I've done it. It was a massive waste of my time. I don't really do this for the money. So it's not like I'm not like a doctor who's like, just get them in here and get them out of there, and that's not what I do. I really give a lot of my time to the individual and I care a great deal about people. And I know from my own personal experience, medical issues ruin your life. That's what it did with me. They can ruin your life. I lost, if I begin to tell you everything that I lost, it's like an old country song, and it's a very sad story, and I wasn't happy that I went through it. But if I can make lemonade out of lemons, as they say, then it's something that fills my heart and soul with some joy and purpose.
All right. So besides hydrogen therapy, and you mentioned diet a little bit, what else are you doing personally to age well?
Just sleeping good. Again, eating more cleanly and eating better. Little exercise, of course, nothing crazy. And like I said, hydrogen is the big one. This study would probably you'd love this for your show, actually. They did a really cool study in Japan where they can actually, they take your blood and they tell you roughly they can see what your age is roughly by looking at your blood. And so they did this with a study in Japan on this guy. They told him, do not change anything in your lifestyle. Don't change the way you eat. Don't change the way anything. Nothing at all. The only thing we want you to do is drink this hydrogen water every single day, specific protocol. And they took his blood before he started. Then he did this for 1 year, by the way. And then he had his blood tested a year later, and his blood was
Wow.
5 years younger. And he didn't change anything except just hydrogen water. I mean, he didn't even do inhalation or anything else, but it was extremely impressive. And if possibly the greatest things I do for anti-aging are probably hydrogen and sleep. Those are probably the big ones, you know.
Great.
So,
well, where can our listeners find you, your resources, and any more information on like Holy Hydrogen or any of the products that you might want to recommend they look into?
So like I said, you know, the carbon distillers from mypurewater.com, the hydrogen machine is from holyhydrogen.com. This is what I personally use for good reason. So I've done all the research. And then beyond that, you know, there's a blender and the powder from Purium. I mean, some pretty simple things. And people can find me. I mean, if people really want to support what I'm doing, which obviously I would appreciate, and they can support it for free. All they have to do is go to YouTube and subscribe. And if they want to watch videos and give videos a thumbs up, that's obviously great. Put a comment there. But people can find me also on Twitter, otherwise known as X, obviously. That really helps because to have those followers, my channel, you know, has been attacked multiple times. So there's a very strong probability that it's going to be taken down. And so, you know, once this happens, you know, the only way you're going to find me is if you also are following me on Twitter and or Rumble and also Instagram. So I'm trying to put myself on all these different places. So when people lose track of me for whatever reason, maybe something else happened with the channel, but they can find me. And then just email me too. My email is uprising144k@gmail.com, you know, for people who sometimes have questions or do want, you know, a personal consult where they're like, hey, I want, you know, what do they call it? Special help, basically. Like hold my hand, you know, hold my hand and really guide me and help me in what you think I would have to do or something along those lines.
Well, this was fascinating. I've learned a lot about hydrogen today. I obviously have a lot more to learn, so I'm going to have to do some investigation, dive into the journals a little bit. And I just appreciate your time today. Thank you for doing what you're doing and just keep aging well.
Thank you so much. And really appreciate you having me on. And I hope that this reaches, even if it just reaches one person that it can help and change their life, that's always something. So
you're welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Jeff.
Thank you for listening. I hope you benefited from today's podcast. And until next time, keep aging well.